Hello everyone, I'm number one Marmaduke fan. Summa Triggerum, Summa Spoilerum, Summa Tangentum. I am continuing my journey through the pile of 50-cent books I foolishly bought because I wanted to support a comic book shop, and the vast majority of them have been painful to sit through. Wolves of Odin is one of my favorite I've read so far, but it's a little bit of a bizarre comic. It's strong and weak in ways I haven't seen in other comics I've talked about, where an artist might have, one set of strengths, but they're weak in other areas, or the total effect might have, some pros and cons to it. Wolves of Odin, the reason I haven't talked about it yet, even though I flipped through this book maybe 3 or 4 times, and then I finally sat down and read it, is the art looks cool, but I think there's something about the coloring which feels slapdash, and was just keeping, every time I picked it up and flipped through it, I think, oh yeah, it looks cool, and then I'd say, and I'd set it down and figure I'll read it later because it looked kind of indie, and I didn't know if I was going to enjoy myself. Then I read it and I really enjoyed myself, and I think this is a recommend. I think you should get this, and I'm going to talk about the cons of the art as I flip through this book. I guess all of my critiques could be summarized as, I feel like this was meant to be a pitch for a really kick-ass animated movie, and it got put in the format of a comic as maybe a vehicle of getting an animated movie made, because as a comic, there are weak moments where it just feels like it was put together real quick, and that the animated movie that Grant Goad has in his head would be absolutely boss. But this isn't that animated movie. So let's just dive in. So first off, there's this really cool pitch that they set up on the title page in the back, that there's a war between the gods, the Norse gods, and Christianity. Odin is furious that Vikings are embracing Christianity, so Odin is cursing the Norse people with these massive werewolf creatures. So everything here is by Grant Goad. He's written it, he's drawn it, and I'm assuming he's also coloring it. So Goad uses a very thick brush line style, and he uses it consistently. So he uses it for his characters, he uses it for faces, he uses it for mountains and landscapes. And this is against how most people vary up their line weight. Some people might have a thicker line on things in the foreground and thinner lines on things in the background. I think he would have benefited from varying his line width a little bit more, but he has a very bold and very confident line style where he'll just draw this stuff and it looks really good, and you can tell that he is drawing this very naturally. This is, I think it mentioned in his bio that he works for Disney in some capacity, maybe not on their animated movies, but he works as an artist for Disney in one of the evil Disney mega corporations, many conglomerate tentacles. So he has the hallmarks of a good Disney quality artist in his work, but he's adapting that into this PG-13/R-rated kick-ass Viking story. So Tyr is being spoken to by like this sort of ghostly Thor, and he goes to visit a witch who is secretly like an evil skeletal creature who can kind of create a beautiful image for herself. And there's a lot of talking about what's going on, but it's pretty dense and it's pretty cool. I think the idea of the Norse gods being real and being angry about Christianity becoming popular is a pretty neat twist on the idea of using religious or mythological deities in your comic. And I've never quite seen it done that way. I'll usually see just Thor show up in a Marvel comic, and he's just there like he's an alien, and they don't mention Christianity that much in relation to Thor. In this, this is accepting the bit that if the Norse gods were real and they care about being worshipped, then of course they'd be ticked off about Christianity. And Odin is killing people, but Thor is rebelling against Odin because he believes that human life has value, and he's selected Tyr as his champion. Now, one of the problems with the coloring is sometimes it'll be normal coloring, and then sometimes it'll be very monochromatic. So it'll be like red, 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 blue, 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 green, 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 green. And I call something that people who don't paint or do fine arts may not realize is that even black and white traditional materials actually have some color to them. Charcoal is black, but it actually has some bluishness to it, in contrast to maybe like a dark burnt umber crayon, which is going to be a really rich, dark, earthy, reddish brown. And if you mix these together, even if the total drawing or painting looks grayish or washed out, you will actually still have a range of warm and cool colors in that grayish drawing, which is why if you just put something in grayscale in Photoshop, it looks different. It loses some of the life and the warmth of the original gray art. And the thing about this is some of the color uses a range of tones. So there's like a red, but there's a little yellow in there, purple, blue, and white. But for lots of pages, it goes to just one solid hue of red. And I call this, this might as well be grayscale. If it were grayscale, you'd just be reading this as a whole bunch of tones. If it's all red, your eye gets sick of red, and it all just reads as one same thing. We could use a break with maybe just a little, not a bright neon green, but maybe like a muddy greenish brown as a contrast to the red, so we can rest there and definitely get some blues or some yellows and oranges in there to complement the red. Anyway, so while Tyr is preparing himself to fight these wolves, these two other Vikings who've got great Viking names are suffering through the wolf invasion. And you can see here, these wolves look kick butt. There's something Samurai Jack-ish about all of this, where the characters have very strong, sharp angles to them. I could picture this as sort of that, maybe the DC animated movies where they have a lot of PG-13 violence in them. And I can picture the animated movie in my head, but the comic is just sort of going up. Mostly the coloring. Mostly the coloring is fighting me as I try to read this, because I don't get a break. My eye doesn't get a break from the same hues and tones for pages and pages in a row. So this healer rescues this old man and informs him that he's been blessed by the god of healing, and Tyr wakes up and talks to the witch. Now I'm looking for... I don't want to just give you the storybook time with Uncle Marmaduke fan. It is an interesting story, and I'd actually encourage you to go dig this up and read it. I'm looking for more good examples of what I'm talking about in the art. The other thing about the way the characters are colored is they're colored in sort of that animated cartoon style with just one solid shadow that's color. But then airbrush will be used in, I think, kind of lazy ways. Here it's not so bad because it's just the glow of a stone, which you'd expect to have some soft light. But occasionally there'll be just like a ton of, I can see the hand of the artist just really quickly in 10 seconds sketching in the airbrush tool in Photoshop. And that takes me out of the story because I see the colorist doodling a few little ideas really quick, or just slapping on a couple little snow effects. Here we go. So this snow is just a little grayish-white blur that is on top of them. It's not like a cool aesthetic thing with chunks of snow floating down from the sky or pelting them with really strong action lines. It's a digital effect floated on top of the strong underdrawing. This is sick. Look at this. Zoom in on the eyes. Zoom out to their intense masculine faces. This is a guy's comic. Bearded men hitting giant wolf monsters with swords is the appeal of this story. So the other two Vikings fight the monster, and the witch explains the nature of evil. I want to fast forward to a really good example I know I'm looking for. So some of the gods, when they start coming out, are really ghostly, and it's like they're barely there. It's almost kind of, come on. So much of this is cool. Like, this was cool. Everything becomes more simplified and graphic as he's falling down and their silhouettes pop up. I gotta find it. It was just sort of this sad panel that illustrates in one panel everything I'm talking about. He sees the face of Thor. I may have skipped over it. He sees the face of Thor, and it's just this little blue airbrush blur effect. Whatever. I've already made my point, so I don't need to, even though that panel would have illustrated my point nicely, the point is that there's too much doobie-doobie-doobie-doobie stuff, where the airbrush tool is just being slapped on, and nothing aesthetic is being done with this to complement how aesthetic and strong this drawing is. I would have preferred if this is such strong line work. What about drawing a misty, ephemeral shape in your black line work, and then making the lines wavier and building up a few lines so it kind of sketches out and becomes hazy. That could have happened, and I think it would have made the total of the effect of the comic have what I love in this drawing, this sort of kick butt, bold line with this really strong shape and these really jagged lines and textures. But then this digital airbrush at 300 pixels with the softness turned down to 0% in Photoshop, which doesn't fit with it. So that's my critique. I want to show you guys some of the cool artists who did guest artwork, because he got quite a few interesting people to do guest art. So let's see here. We've got Matthew Goodmanson from Jensenova.com. Kind of an overall dark brownish purple color palette, but man, jumping down on a wolf with lightning striking the sword, yeah, I'm down for it. And this is kind of a cooler example of what I'm talking about. So this person is more of a painter and gets a very soft, natural feel for the snow and the mist down here and little white flecks of snow up here. But then this rock is more solid and more sharp lined. The way they're being painted fits with what they are. Rock, it's drawn hard. Soft mist, it's drawn soft and loosey-goosey. Flecks of white snow, it's drawn in sharp little white dots. Okay. Otis Frampton from otisframpton.com. Very, very Samurai Jacky. I mean, it still has the black outline, but very Saturday morning cartoon kind of style image of a Viking defeating a wolf. Then we've got Dennis Budd from michaelpencil1138.com with kind of a cute drawing of the witch in her sexy form, not her evil skeleton undead form. Another drawing of the witch by Jessica Hickman, jessicahickman.com. Little weak, something about that thigh that looks a little bit atrophied, but yeah, cool dynamic shot. I dig it. I'm glad it's included. Kate Cook, katecandraw.com. Very cute kind of cartoon style. And again, the witch. They set up that the witch is going to be a character in a sequel to this, and I hope there is one. I'm probably going to go try to find it. Oh, she's got a whole bunch of little baby wolves, I guess. Cat Stags, airbrushcat.com. More of Tyr fighting the wolf with his mighty axe. What kind of style is that? It looks almost like it could be traditional painting. Okay. Very, very textured, very painterly style. Now, what's this? Art Grafunkel. Grafunkel.livejournal.com. Man, that's like the early days of the internet there. This is almost like some kind of metal rock cover depiction of the wolf and the moon. Interesting. It's a little bizarre. The wolf feels realistic on one side. It's got that eye there, and then it's got the pinprick of light on the other side. But its proportions are somewhat human-like it's squashed and Batman-ish. I don't know. That's an interesting abstract take on the wolf, I think, where it's getting at both the wolf idea and the man idea, but it's not quite realistic. Cynthia Cummins, cynthiacumminsart.com. Cute pic of the witch. Ooh, was a cool one. Mark McHaley, bp.rubberslug.com. Pencils by Grant Goad. So Grant Goad did the pencil composition, pretty cool. Tyr facing down a wolf and the wolf's reflection in on the sword. And then I guess that means Mark McHaley did inks and paints. And boy, Goad, hire a Mark McHaley to complement your pencils here, bro. Look at this. So speckles of paint and not just an airbrush effect. Some shading on the beard and stuff, but pretty much, even though this is traditional paint and there's a range of colors, it's pretty simple ideas. Bright orange, white, dark red for the shadows, and maybe a little bit of overlap where it gets softer, but I really understand what the contours and the shapes are in this painting style. I think this whole book would have benefited from having this color style to it, or maybe fully committing, even this, if you want more of that Saturday morning cartoon look on Adult Swim, where it's got PG-13 violence. This kind of coloring was pretty sweet. I still don't like these little airbrush snowflake effects, but the feel of this feels more consistent and solid. Yeah, so what a great little group of guest artists. Oh, they've got a couple ads for some goofy-looking comics that SR Graphics does, but this is very fun. What did he do? Lucasfilm Star Wars The Clone Wars Online. The Wolves of Odin offers a fantasy tale with animated flair. The thing I was thinking about is, a while ago on this channel, I reviewed every one of Glenn Keane's children's book series, Adam Raccoon. I was going to say Christian children's book series. They have Christian themes, but one of the things I praised about that book series is Glenn Keane is such a master that they transcend, being Sunday school room books to being beautiful artistic stories. And what blew my mind while reading them is he worked on those while working on as a lead animator on major Disney animated features. So I thought those were books that he worked on in his spare time in his retirement. Those were books he worked on in his spare few hours of the day, maybe, when he wasn't working on a major motion picture production. And they're masterful children's books. Wolves of Odin has the feel of a passion project Grant Goad was working on in his spare time, and I think it shows up in the post-production, where I would almost rather have seen his solid black and white line work all by itself. And if it didn't work, there were some pages I couldn't find where Thor shows up and he's just a blue blob, where obviously there was no drawing done there in the underdrawing portion. If you don't have, if I can't tell what it looks like in the underdrawing portion, and your strength is this great black and white art, you're probably not going to be able to fix it in post or fix it in Photoshop unless you're really confident that you can draw in color in Photoshop as well as you can draw these great characters with this bold line of yours. But overall, an enjoyable experience. This could be just, and I'm not saying this week, I'm saying this could be the week opening start to something that could become much stronger and be well remembered down the road, where maybe this would be a little bit embarrassing looking back on it and the airbrush effects, but there is some real talent here and there's some real passion here for a kick-butt Viking story, and it's left me hanging for more. I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. I love you guys. Why don't you like, comment, and subscribe? And if you want notifications, click the bell icon and YouTube will let you know when I've got a new review out. I'll catch you later.